Why do the Air Force and Navy still use nautical miles? And what the heck is a knot? In this video, I'm going to explain the difference between a nautical mile and a standard mile, or a statute mile as it's technically called. I'll explain why pilots and sailors still use nautical miles, and then I'll explain what a knot is as a measure of speed. I'm going to make this super simple, so let's get to it. To answer the question of what a nautical mile is, I'm going to have to bring you back to elementary school geography real quick. As you know, we separate the Earth on a grid of longitude and latitude. So you can think of longitude as going long, and latitude, you can think of it as moving up a ladder. So longitude rests on the vertical axis, and latitude rests on the horizontal axis. If you look at the center of the Earth, the latitude line that runs through it is called the equator. And at the equator, we call that 0 degrees latitude. If we move north of the equator, we can go all the way up to 90 degrees north at the North Pole. And if we move south of the equator, we can move all the way down to 90 degrees south at the South Pole. The 0 degree longitude line begins in Greenwich, England. Why Greenwich? In 1884, representatives from 25 nations met in Washington, D.C. at the International Meridian Conference. They took a vote, and from that vote, they decided that the Royal Observatory located in Greenwich would be the prime meridian of the world. Before that was established, map makers were using their own national capitals as the meridians of the world, and it was becoming incredibly difficult for sailors to navigate with a bunch of non-standardized maps. So the prime meridian was established with that Greenwich line being 0 degrees, until we go all the way around the Earth for 360 degrees until we end up back at that Greenwich line. Now back to latitude. As I mentioned, from the equator we can go 90 degrees north, and we can go 90 degrees south. Within each degree, that space is further divided into minutes, and there are 60 minutes in every degree. Likewise, you have 60 seconds in every minute. By creating these very specific longitude and latitude designations, you're able to pinpoint an exact location on the globe. A nautical mile simply represents the distance in 1 minute of latitude, which ends up being 1.15 statute miles. So, if someone ever tells you that they're traveling 10 nautical miles, you can simply do the math to understand that they're going 11.5 miles. But as you can see, since nautical miles are based off of exact measurements of degrees of the Earth, and they take into account the curvature of the Earth, nautical miles are a much more precise measurement of distance than statute miles. I mean, a standard mile, a statute mile, the way that we got that dates back to the Roman times when they used to consider a mile to be 1,000 paces, one pace being 5 Roman feet. Over time, the measure of a foot changed, which naturally changed the measure of a mile. So essentially, the standard mile is just a much more arbitrary measure of distance. But if I'm trying to be exact, if you have a ship out there in the middle of the ocean, and they're calling a mayday, and the Coast Guard has to go out and help them, the Coast Guard is going to need to know, no kidding, longitude and latitude. Where are you located? Because they're going to have to make sure that they have enough gas to fly out or sail out to come get you. Segue into a knot since we're trip planning. What is a knot? It is simply a measure of 1 nautical mile per hour. Back in the day, before we had high-tech electronics to tell sailors how fast they were moving, sailors would tie knots into rope at precisely measured lengths in the rope. As they were moving, they would toss one end of the rope into the water and let it unspool for 30 seconds. After 30 seconds, they'd pull the rope back in and count how many knots had been pulled into the water. And that's how they were able to determine how fast the ship was moving, by the number of knots that were pulled into the water. So the next time somebody tries to look fancy around you and tells you how fast the wind is moving in knots per hour, all you gotta do is multiply that number by 1.15 and you will be on the same page. Please like, subscribe, leave a comment, and share this video. Stay awesome, and I will see you.